Hi, today's tutorial is based on focus question 3. The dot point is the learning environment and the dash is practice methods in brackets, massed, distributed, whole and part. When you look at your notes for practice methods, what we're talking about here is a coach and how they deliver their sessions and the skills that they are teaching athletes. This is about the quality and quantity of practice and the important role it plays in athletes learning a skill. A good coach will organise training that is appropriate to the task and the athlete. You would be worried if a swimmer was doing most of their training on land. Skills that are learned for athletes must either be broken down and explained by the coach in a specific way, or that athlete must train in a specific way to understand the requirements of the game. And this dash point practice method looks at the different ways a coach can deliver a skill to their athletes. First of all, we're going to look at massed and distributed practice. Now, massed practice is a continuous practice session with brief rest breaks, or when rest breaks are given, they are short. Now, this is for athletes that are highly motivated and usually they would have learned the skill beforehand. The example that you've got in the notes is a gymnast learning a handstand where drilling continues. This might be specifically hard for the gymnast as well because they're learning it on a beam, for example. This is a difficult skill, and if a coach is going to use a massed practice here, the athlete has to be highly motivated and also willing to put in a long period of time for a training session. Mass practice is also ideal for those athletes that are time poor or don't have enough time to participate in a number of sessions per week. The coach here is extending training periods and little rest breaks are given. You can see that if this practice method is going to be used for the athlete, that they do need to be motivated and want to be at training. Distributed practice is different, and the main difference, as you can see on your notes, is sessions are broken up by periods of work and then relief. Mass practice focuses on continuous practice, where distributed practice is a little bit like interval training where there are periods of work and rest. This is great for game sports where there are a number of components that make up the entirety of skills that the athlete will need. If you look at games like soccer, hockey, basketball, there are lots of different components. Soccer, for example, components will be passing, shooting and headering. A coach wouldn't spend 40 minutes on a headering practice because one, it might cause some discomfort to the athlete, but also it's boring and they will become unmotivated. So usually when you participate in game-based sports, they will break up these skills into different drills and then usually apply it to a game at the end. Distributed practice works best when learners are in the early stages of learning, and we call this the cognitive stage. That also links to a later part of the syllabus. And this can be when the task is difficult or boring, such as my header example in soccer. The performer might lack interest or is unmotivated, again a difference from mass practice, and therefore skills will need to be broken up, and having a number of different drills in a practice will keep the athlete motivated. Now, before we move on to our whole and part practice, which is the second section of this dash point, I would like to show you a video of a basketball layup. I'm going to then use this example when we talk about part practice. As you can see in the video, there are a number of components to the layup, and it is a very difficult skill. The athlete has to dribble the ball, then take 2 steps, and the final part of this skill is actually shooting at the basket and getting the ball in. Now, this skill for an athlete will be practice using the part practice, and this is when a skill is broken into smaller components, and that's because the skill is difficult to learn. For an example, a teacher that is teaching a class the layup would split the skill up and teach them the different components. So they'll learn how to dribble the ball up to the basket, then they might apply the steps and the dribble together, and then the last component is shooting the ball. And not only learning the skill to shoot the ball, but how do you actually get the ball in? And you can see from the video that the athlete is using the backboard. So for part practice, this is when the skill is difficult. A tennis serve can be another great example because there are lots of components to that skill, such as the ball toss, the racket back, and then the follow through. The difference from whole practice to part practice is whole practice applied when a skill is practiced in its entirety. And that's when the skill might be easier to practice and it can be done in its entirety. And the example that you've got in your notes is a softball pitch. Coaches may use a combination of methods of the two, whole practice and part practice, and this is called whole part whole practice. This is when a coach or a teacher might demonstrate the skill first. So if they're doing a layup, the coach will demonstrate what that actually looks like so that athletes can visualize the skill in their minds. Then the coach would send them off and they practice the individual skills, the dribbling, the steps, and then the shooting. And then the coach brings it back once they believe the athlete has gained the knowledge and is able to perform the skill, and they bring it back to them, practice it in its entirety, which is called the whole part whole method. Now, the question to ask yourself and to finalise this dash point is what actually works best for athletes, because the research is inconclusive. In general, it really does depend on that athlete in terms of their motivation and how they approach training. And it also really comes down to the skill. How difficult is the skill to learn? Does it need to be broken up and therefore the part practice is used? Or is the skill quite an easy one that the athletes can practice in their entirety? Sometimes the skill might not be easy, but the athlete is motivated to practice that skill until it's perfected. And that's where we can use our gymnast at the start as an example, as a whole massed practice. Thank you.